Hello, this is Dave Sugarbaker. Today is the second day of November 2025, and I've tried several times to record this, and somehow my phone is not cooperating, or the operator is not doing the right things. And so this is my third attempt at recording this particular sermon. This is a parable on pride, and it's Luke 18. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus: God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of all my income. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, Jesus said, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. For 1,000 years before the time of Jesus, Jewish religion operated under the mistaken notion that if you were healthy and rich, you must be a good person. You were obviously favored by God. On the other hand, if you were poor or suffering from any sort of illness or misfortune, then God must be punishing you. God was a righteous judge, after all, and you must have broken one of God's rules somehow. This prejudice against the poor, the sick, and the unlucky gave Jews permission to ignore people in need. Hey, if God's punishing them, who am I to step in and get in God's way? Even Israel's collective national history seems to be seen through this lens. If the invader was at the door, and there were several invaders, if the invader is threatening murder and mayhem, it was time to be sure Jewish society as a whole was complying with God's rules. If everyone was righteous, then God would not allow bad things to happen to Israel. But if Jewish leaders, on the other hand, had gotten lax and perhaps allowed just a little bit of worship of other gods, then bad things were going to fall on Israel. There's only one book in the Old Testament that dares to question this neat but simplistic understanding of rich and poor, healthy versus unhealthy, and lucky as opposed to unlucky. That's the book of Job. There once was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. That man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He had 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people in the East. The story of Job is an argument against the prevailing religious perspective within Judaism. The writer of Job argued that bad things can happen to good people, and that poverty, illness, and misfortune are not evidence that one is being punished by God for failing to follow God's commandments. The challenge of the book of Job was largely ignored, and Jews continued to believe that God blessed the righteous and God blessed the righteous with health and riches, and punished the bad by dishing out poverty and illness and misfortune to them. It's amazing to me that the book of Job was included as part of the Old Testament. It runs counter to what precedes and follows it. The book of Job was written about 400 to 600 years before the time of Jesus. Judaism continued to emphasize righteousness, that is, a right relationship with God and with others. But the best way to demonstrate your righteousness was to follow the Torah, the law of Moses, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Follow the Torah to the letter. If you go through the first 5 books, you'll find commandments that the Lord God made, and there are 613 of them. Pharisees emerged as a distinct religious group within Jewish culture around 165 to 150 BC. By the time of Jesus, Pharisees were hyper-focused on demonstrating their righteousness, or perhaps better said, their self-righteousness, by ostentatiously complying with all 630 commandments of the Torah. Jesus called them blind guides and whitewashed tombs. He creates a teaching story, a parable, in which a Pharisee and a tax collector are among the people going to the temple to pray. The self-righteous Pharisee, standing by himself, reminded God of how good he was. God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even this tax collector. The temple really should have a separate room for us good people. I shouldn't have to worship with riffraff. I fast twice a week, and I give 1/10 of all my income. You know, I could just hug myself. I'm so good. I'll bet nobody else in the temple right now can match my tithe or my religious performance. By contrast, the tax collector stood far off, as Jesus says. Why did he stand far off? Well, because nobody wanted to have anything to do with him. He could see the religious performance of the Pharisee. By contrast, the tax collector couldn't even look up toward heaven. But as he beat his breast in contrition, he prayed, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Jesus said, I tell you, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. Isn't it great that we don't have Pharisees anymore? Well, I'm afraid we do. Self-righteousness is alive and well today. Sometimes I look around and think self-righteousness is a really popular commodity in churches today. It fills a lot of pews and a lot of parking lots. There's a different picture, though, that nourishes me. I call it the beggar's church. It's my best definition of church, and that is that it's a place where one beggar tells another beggar where to find bread. First, in the beggar's church, I know that I'm broke. I'll never deserve the love that God has for me. Even though I worship him, I do get, although I don't deserve it, I do get daily nourishment. In gratitude for the love shown to me, I share my knowledge of this God with others who may be interested in finding the same spiritual bread. There's no spiritual one-upsmanship in the beggar's church. You don't have to be a spiffy prayer. You don't even have to pray in whole sentences or in whole words. Nobody gets divine brownie points for showing another beggar where to find bread. You just do it. There's no bragging about extra bread that God gives you because you're chosen. You live in humility. And if you happen to catch the noxious virus of self-righteousness and start acting like you're better than the other beggars, us other beggars are going to tell you to knock it off. There's no one-size-fits-all formula for knowing God. You're going to have to blaze that trail yourself. All I can do is tell you how others have done it. There will be any number of differing right ways to pray, to serve God, to live the life that God has given you. You find your right way. At the Beggar's Church, one of our really great prayers will be, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Now, God bless you. Take care. If this is of value to you, if you find it interesting or important, I'd appreciate it if you'd pass it along. And thanks very much for your time to listen to this, and I'll see you soon.